Hey everyone, this is Stephanie from Vista Consulting Team, and today I want to talk about your duties as an employer regarding the COVID-19 crisis. I want to talk about the responsibilities that you may have when an employee tests positive and how to best prepare for the eventual return to the office for so many of your people who are currently working from home. So let's get right into it. The first thing we need to know is that if we have someone who tests positive for the virus, we must keep their name confidential. We cannot disclose that to any of their coworkers or anyone for that matter. You'll want to begin some contact tracing if someone reports that they have contracted the virus. If they've been exposed to people in the office shortly before that, you'll want to kind of trace back and ask yourselves who have they come into close contact with and keep a record of that. Notify other coworkers who were in close contact with this person and send them home for a 14-day quarantine period if they're not already working from home. Notify all employees that someone in the office tested positive and where that person had been, generally speaking, without disclosing the person's name. Notify the building manager and other tenants if you share space. Deep clean all common areas and let your people know that you've done so. If the transmission occurred at work, you do have a duty to notify OSHA and your workers' compensation carrier. If a person calls in sick, you may ask whether they're experiencing COVID-19 symptoms. This is different than the usual guidelines in human resources. Generally speaking, when someone calls in sick, we don't ask details about their symptoms, but these are extraordinary circumstances, so it certainly is permissible. Okay, so now how to prepare for when employees eventually do come back to work. If you are in full compliance with the CDC rules and state and local ordinances, you may require your people to return to work in the office. But you'll first want to review your handbook policies, such as attendance, PTO, and ask yourself, do they still make sense under these circumstances? Decide now how to handle PTO requests and vacation requests going forward, and make sure that whatever you decide complies with local ordinances and labor laws. Ask whether your bonus plans and commission structures still make sense. Ask whether your exempt employees are continuing to perform the duties which make them exempt. Otherwise, you'll have to reevaluate their status. Now, what can we expect when the stay-at-home or shelter-in-place orders begin to subside and people are called back to work? From the employee's perspective, we are starting to see some flattening of the curve at this point in a lot of states, and we see that there's a promising new drug in the news. And so we see that light at the end of the tunnel, and it's very hopeful. So I think that this is going to become relevant sooner rather than later. So it's best now to anticipate how our people are going to feel about coming back into the office. Be prepared for the fear factor. Some employees will not want to return to the building for fear of exposure. Know that, be sensitive to it, have a plan in place to talk to them about it. If an employee is fearful because they have an underlying medical condition, they would be considered members of a vulnerable population, which is a term of art coined by the Trump administration in the Return to Work notice they recently published. If they are a member of a vulnerable population, you may be required to provide them with an accommodation. Consider whether you have to provide PPE, personal protective equipment, or even if you don't have to, should you do so voluntarily? Now, how to limit potential employer liability. You'll want to have clear guidelines in place regarding the decision-making process you use to bring people back from furloughs. Avoid methods that could expose you to claims of disparate or discriminatory treatment. Have a written policy in place stating that specific allowances were made for this unique situation and that the ordinary policies that existed prior to this crisis are the standard procedures, and that your policies do revert back to standard procedures barring any crisis or when the crisis is over. Finally, document the expense and any lack of productivity that you've noticed during these times while the office was basically closed, while people were working from home. And document why, objectively speaking, it may not be feasible for your entire workforce to work remotely. Anticipate that you will be asked by many people whether or not you'll permit them to continue to work remotely, or at least from time to time. If this isn't feasible for you, have that information ready, be prepared for the question, and have it documented. Basically, we're talking about preparing in advance, knowing what the plan is, having a plan in place. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, right? So prepare ahead of time and anticipate. Thanks, everybody. Look forward to speaking to you next time.